for even the most powerful and most attentive planeswalker arriving at a single specific spot, such as, for instance, Baltrice's ability to appear in the Foundry's sealed room, or the dead-end hall in the Consortium's heart, was a matter not merely of intent, but of regular practice and intimate familiarity. Perhaps unsurprisingly, possession by a spirit that had made the journey to the world in question precisely once failed to qualify as either. And thus, Jace and Liliana had found themselves in the midst of a seemingly endless desert, the sun beating down on them with hammer-heavy blows, and no trace of Tezzeret's sanctum, or any other signpost of civilization in sight. Even the various summoned scouts they sent soaring high above them found no sign of the Artificer. They had, however, spotted a slow-moving, dromad-drawn caravan trudging through the sands some few miles away. Now, their skin already turning red beneath the blazing heat, the planeswalkers sat on simple wooden stools before an older, leather-skinned fellow named Zeraphim. Clad in voluminous, sand-hued robes, he appeared almost a part of the desert itself. The rest of his brethren, similarly dressed, waited politely some yards away while their leader conducted his negotiations. "Easily spare the clothes you require, my new friends," he was saying to Jace, "but such things are not easy to make." "I understand," Jace told him. "How about 4 jugs of water, then?" He begrudged the mana it would take to summon so much water to this parched environment, but they needed the desert garb and, more important, the directions Zeraphim could offer. To his credit, the old nomad didn't jump on the deal immediately. "Forgive me for doubting your judgment, but you appear so ill-prepared for desert travel. Can you spare such a quantity of water? I would hate for our deal to leave you dying of thirst before you reach your goal." "I appreciate your concern, friend," Jace told him, ignoring the impatient tapping of Liliana's foot beside him. "But we'll make do, I assure you." "Very well, then we have a bargain." The nomad gestured, and several of his brethren came forward, carrying robes akin to the one he wore. "Not to keep questioning you, my new friends," he said hesitantly, "but are you certain you wish to approach the Iron Tower? Even we go there only when we have many valuables to trade, and then only reluctantly. It is a bad place." "I don't doubt that at all," Jace admitted, "but from your description, yes, it is exactly where we must go." "So be it. I wish you the luck of the heavens. You must start from here, traveling due west for 2 days, then..." It was in fact 4 days later when Jace Beleren and Liliana Vess strode from the seemingly endless deserts, their skin chapped and windburned despite their protective magics and native garb, to finally arrive at the metallic monstrosity that was Tezzeret's home. Despite the heat, Jace had insisted on wearing his blue cloak, though he did so beneath the nomad's robes. He knew damn well that he was being superstitious, even silly, but he'd owned it so long, survived with it for so long, he felt naked facing Tezzeret without it. Both were tired from the journey. Both were worried that the sands had offered them little in the way of mana suited to their magics. They could only hope to discover some viable sources within the sanctum itself, or risk finding themselves truly outmatched. It rose from beneath the sands, a shallow hill that gleamed blindingly in the pounding sun. Perfectly smooth, at least from this distance, it might as well have been shaped from a single slab of alloy, only one solitary tower in the structure's center, stabbing dagger-like at the heavens and boasting numerous spires and protrusions of its own, marred the otherwise pristine surface of the gentle slope. Uneven heaps of sand surrounded it, rising and falling waves constantly reshaped by the desert winds. The mages studied it, hands held high to shade their eyes from the brilliance. From their current vantage, it was impossible to say precisely how large the structure might be, for the desert here was flat and featureless, their view obstructed by sand-speckled breeze and the haze of rising heat. Finally, Jace turned to Liliana and said simply, "How much magic do you suppose it takes to keep the place cool?" She snorted, and they trudged their way closer still. As they walked, each summoned a small flock of minions, tiny fae in Jace's case, with the power to make themselves invisible, while Liliana called up a handful of translucent spirits and ordered them on ahead. They learned much as they neared the looming structure. It was not, as they had supposed, perfectly circular. Rather, they had appeared toward the back of what turned out to be a crescent, shallower on the inner curve than the outer, and at the tips than the rear. The tower emerged from the highest point, at the apex of the crescent's bend, and it was not, in fact, constructed of a single sheet of metal, though the individual pieces were so perfectly fitted together that it might as well have been. But most important, and most discouraging, neither the mages nor their unearthly minions could find anything resembling a door. It seemed very much as though the structure had simply been sealed up during its construction and left that way. Again and again, the Fae and the Phantoms circled the complex. Again and again, they came up empty. Crouched behind a sand dune, Jace and Liliana grew ever more frustrated. "Is it possible," Jace finally asked, "that there really isn't a door? Could Tezzeret be relying solely on teleportation magics?" Liliana shook her head. "Obviously there's more to this world than desert. Carrying enough material to build this thing from other worlds would have taken centuries." "Right. So, the same is true of supplies, Jace. Tezzeret's got to have people delivering food, building materials and whatnot. Carrying supplies across a desert means caravans, dromads or camels, wagons, you name it. You think he's teleporting entire wagon trains through those walls? Ah, fair point. So where's the damned door?" "What, I have to answer everything?" Again, they lapsed into silence. Ultimately, it proved to be a far simpler matter than they were making it out to be. Inspired by their successful efforts to track Baltrice, Liliana finally called up the smallest, weakest, and least offensive phantom she could muster, the better to avoid setting off any alarms or safeguards, and sent it through the walls to wander the structure's passageways. It took the ghostly entity only a short while to find a hall, occupied by several guards, that appeared to dead end against the outer wall, and to report back with its location. Of course, that still left them without a means of opening said door, but now, at least, Jace was in his element. "Ask your phantom," he said to Liliana, gathering his own concentration and beginning the first stages of a clairvoyance spell, "to point me in the direction of the guards." As it turned out, the door was a section of the wall itself, enchanted to fade away at the command of the guards inside. Jace's and Liliana's nomad garb wasn't sufficient to get them to open that door, but the illusion of a consortium guard uniform beneath that robe which Jace casually pulled aside, did the trick. One of the guards now lay senseless at Jace's feet out in the shifting sands, a second dead in the hallway where Liliana's specter had caught him before he could reach the speaking tube to report their arrival. The whole affair had taken roughly a minute. "You know you might have triggered an alarm sending in that specter," he snapped at Liliana as he dragged the fallen guard out of sight of the doorway. "There's a reason we sent the weakest spirit we could to do our scouting, remember?" Liliana shrugged. "As opposed to what would have happened if I'd let that man report us, we're invading Tezzeret's sanctum, Jace. I think we're past the point of mincing about, don't you?" Jace grumbled, which she took correctly as a sign that he knew she was right but didn't want to say so. "What now?" she asked him. "Well," he said, after taking a moment to calm himself, "nobody's running to attack us yet, so we'll assume the alarm's not capable of detecting phantoms after all. Or that there is no alarm," Liliana suggested. Jace remembered the setup on Ravnica, didn't believe it for a second. "Have your specter drag the body out of here," he ordered. "Not sure one of them can do it alone, Jace. They're not real comfortable manipulating solid objects." "Fine," Jace grimaced, and the unconscious guard rose unsteadily to his feet. "He'll help." Even as the mismatched pair set about dragging the other soldier to join his fellow outside, Jace was shoveling aside heaps of sand, preparing a secret, shallow grave. Once the corpse was outside, Jace raised a second illusion, one that he hoped would convince anyone inside that the wall was still closed. "Assuming there is an alarm," Liliana said a moment later, "how do we get in?" The guard stood motionless as Jace rifled through his thoughts. "It's like the alarm on Ravnica," he confirmed. "It's designed to detect the presence of unauthorized entrants." "All right, so what do we do?" "We have a polite little conversation," Jace said with a smile as the soldier strode back into the hallway and lifted the speaking tube from the wall, "with someone who has the power to authorize us." It proved no harder for Jace to overpower the shift commander, a gold-skinned desert elf named Iravan, than it had been any of the others. Carefully, he commanded the unconscious fellow to rise, to move to the alarm controls and authorize the planeswalkers to pass. Liliana nodded at Jace and turned away, watching the elf as he spoke into a strange gemstone inlaid into the wall, and thus she missed the darkening of Jace's gaze as he looked upon her. For Jace had learned something within Commander Iravan's mind, something that worried him far more than any alarm. Surely the Consortium's ranking officers, if not the average soldier, would have been briefed on the organization's many enemies, and indeed, Iravan knew full well who Jace Beleren was. He knew, too, of Calist Roca, of Nicol Bolas, of the Fae Oberillia Zant, who had stolen from Tezzeret's minions many a valuable artifact, and of half a dozen others whom Tezzeret had deemed a threat to his empire. But despite her claims so long ago that she too was hiding from their mutual foe, Jace found no knowledge at all of the sorceress Liliana Vess. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please consider leaving a like or sharing this video with your friends. If you subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell, you'll be alerted whenever I upload new videos. If you have a topic you'd like me to discuss, feel free to let me know in the comments section below. Finally, if you'd like to support me directly, well, I've created a Patreon for this channel. If you like what I do and want to help me out, go check it out. A link to it will be in the description below. Thanks again, and have a great day.